Easter dinner at my parents' house always felt like walking onto a movie set where everyone had memorized their lines except me. The air was heavy with cinnamon, roasted lamb, and something else, expectation. I should have known this year would be different when my father insisted I wear something professional instead of my usual casual attire. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Mom greeted me at the door with her practiced smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. Olivia, you're finally here. She glanced at my navy blazer and cream blouse. I thought you were going to wear that red dress I bought you. This seemed more appropriate, I said, handing her the bottle of wine I'd brought. It was expensive. More than I could comfortably afford on my nonprofit salary, but I knew the judgment that would come if I showed up with anything less. Well, at least you look presentable, she sighed. Your brother's boss is joining us, and first impressions matter. This was news to me. Nathan's boss? Why wasn't I told? She waved away my question. It was last minute. Richard called this morning and invited him. Such a wonderful networking opportunity. Of course. My father, Richard Gardner, never missed a chance to orchestrate connections. I stepped into the living room, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that always accompanied family gatherings. The house looked immaculate as always, crystal glasses arranged on the dining table, fresh flowers in the antique vase my mother treasured, family photos strategically placed to tell the story my parents wanted to project. I noticed my college graduation photo had been moved from the mantel to a less prominent spot on the bookshelf, while Nathan's law school graduation now dominated the central display. My brother Nathan spotted me from across the room and raised his glass. At 32, just 2 years older than me, he looked every bit the rising corporate lawyer in his tailored suit and confidence that came from years of being the golden child. Beside him stood a tall man with salt and pepper hair, around 50, with an expensive watch and the easy posture of someone accustomed to authority. Liv, Nathan called out. Come meet Marcus Hendricks. He's the managing partner at Caldwell and Ross. I crossed the room, extending my hand. Nice to meet you, Mr. Hendricks. The moment his eyes met mine, something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition, then surprise. He hesitated before shaking my hand. It's actually Marcus, please. And you're Olivia Gardner? Before I could respond, my father appeared at my shoulder, champagne flute in hand. Yes, our daughter. She works at some community center downtown. His dismissive tone was subtle but unmistakable. Nathan just closed the Peterson merger under Marcus's guidance. Youngest associate to lead such a significant acquisition. The Peterson merger? I couldn't help asking. The name sounded familiar. Nathan jumped in. It's a complicated deal, Liv. Wouldn't interest you much. Fascinating work, my father continued, steering the conversation away from me. Richard tells me your numbers have been exceptional this quarter, he said to Marcus. The board must be pleased. Marcus nodded politely but kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Indeed. Though success takes many forms. Sometimes the most valuable contributions aren't measured in quarterly reports. An awkward silence followed before my mother announced dinner was ready. As we moved to the dining room, I felt Marcus's eyes on me again. Dinner began with Dad's traditional Easter prayer, thanking God for the success and prosperity He has bestowed upon this family. My mother beamed when he mentioned Nathan's remarkable achievements and bright future ahead. I kept my eyes down, pushing food around my plate. So Olivia, Marcus said once the prayer ended, your father mentioned you work at a community center? Yes, I'm the program director at Riverside Community Action Network. We provide resources and advocacy for underserved neighborhoods. My father cut in. Just until she finds something more substantial. Nathan was telling her about an administrative position at the firm that might be more suitable. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. My work is substantial, Dad. We just secured a major grant to expand our housing advocacy program. A grant, my father repeated with a tight smile. Well, that's nice. Nathan just received his second bonus this year. The firm really values his contribution. My mother quickly changed the subject. Marcus, Richard tells me you have a vacation home in the Berkshires? We've been thinking of purchasing something similar. As the conversation drifted to real estate and investment properties, I caught Marcus studying me again. When my father excused himself to retrieve a special bottle of scotch he wanted to share, Marcus leaned slightly toward me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Riverside Community Action Network, he said quietly. You wouldn't happen to be the same Olivia Gardner who presented the impact report on the Westside Development Project last month? I nearly dropped my fork. You were at that hearing? I was. The City Planning Commission invited me as an independent observer. Your presentation was illuminating. Nathan looked between us, confusion evident on his face. What's this about? Marcus straightened up as my father returned. Your sister gave quite a compelling presentation to the City Planning Commission about the impact of certain development projects on affordable housing availability. My father's expression hardened as he uncorked the scotch. Olivia has always been passionate about her causes. The way he said causes made it sound like a character flaw. It was more than passion, Marcus continued. It was thoroughly researched, data-driven, and ultimately persuasive. The commission voted to require a 20% affordable housing minimum on all new developments in the affected areas. Quite an achievement. The table fell silent. My mother's smile froze in place while Nathan stared at his plate. My father poured the scotch with deliberate slowness. I wasn't aware you were involved with city planning decisions, I said to Marcus, finding my voice. I serve on several civic committees. My firm believes in corporate responsibility. He accepted the scotch from my father. In fact, I was quite impressed by your coalition's approach. Using economic impact data alongside human stories was effective. My father cleared his throat. Well, speaking of achievements, Nathan just completed the Peterson merger ahead of schedule. Saved the client millions in regulatory fees. The Peterson merger, Marcus nodded. Yes, that was good work, Nathan. Though interestingly, part of our due diligence involved reviewing the very same neighborhood impact studies your sister's organization produced. Nathan's head snapped up. What? Our ethical investment guidelines require consideration of community impact. Your sister's research was referenced extensively in our final approval process. Marcus took a sip of his scotch. In fact, the Peterson deal nearly stalled until we incorporated several of the mitigating measures recommended in her report. The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost hear the narrative my parents had constructed begin to crack. I had no idea, Nathan finally said, looking at me with genuine surprise. Why would you? My father's voice had an edge. Olivia never mentions her work at these gatherings. I've tried, I said quietly. You've just never seemed interested. My mother jumped in with forced brightness. Who would like dessert? I've made your favorite lemon tart, Nathan. As she bustled to the kitchen, Marcus turned to me. Actually, I've been meaning to connect with your organization. We have a corporate foundation that might align with your housing initiatives. Do you have a card? Before I could answer, my father interrupted. Marcus, you must try this scotch. 30 years aged, quite exceptional. The conversation shifted again, but something had changed in the room's dynamic. I caught Nathan watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, something like confusion mixed with reassessment. When dessert was served, my father launched into an elaborate story about Nathan's negotiation skills during the merger. He stood his ground against executives twice his age. That's the Gardner spirit, we don't back down. Speaking of not backing down, Marcus said, turning to me, your affordable housing testimony was quite something. I understand you went up against Westridge Development Group? They're not known for compromising. They didn't want to, I admitted. But we had documented how their previous projects had displaced over 200 families. The data was irrefutable. You opposed Westridge? My father's tone was sharp. Charles Westridge is a personal friend. I've golfed with him for years. I'm aware, I said, meeting his gaze. That didn't change the facts. This is hardly appropriate dinner conversation, my mother interjected. Marcus seemed unperturbed. On the contrary, I find it fascinating. The corporate world is evolving, Elizabeth. Social impact is increasingly integral to business decisions. He turned to Nathan. Your recent case study on regulatory compliance mentioned this, didn't it? Nathan nodded slowly. Yes, it did. He looked at me again, this time with something like respect. My father stood abruptly. Let's move to the living room for coffee. As everyone shifted, I helped my mother clear the plates, feeling her tension in the rigid way she stacked the dishes. "Did you have to embarrass your father like that?" she whispered harshly. "He's worked so hard to impress Marcus." "I didn't do anything, Mom. I just answered questions about my work." "You know how important Nathan's career is to this family. This dinner was supposed to be about his promotion." I set down the plates I was holding. "And what about my career? Does that matter at all?" "Don't be dramatic, Olivia. You work at a nonprofit. It's charitable work. It's not the same as what Nathan does." "Apparently it affected what Nathan does enough to influence his merger," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Her expression hardened. "This attitude is exactly why your father doesn't discuss your work. Always competing with your brother instead of supporting him." I stepped back, stung by the unfairness. "I've supported Nathan my entire life. When has anyone in this family supported me?" She didn't answer, just turned away and began rinsing dishes with unnecessary force. In the living room, I found Marcus and Nathan in conversation while my father poured coffee with rigid movements that betrayed his irritation. "Olivia," Marcus said as I entered, "I was just telling Nathan about the Affordable Housing Summit next month. Your organization is presenting, correct?" "Yes, we're sharing our community engagement model. Several cities have expressed interest in implementing similar programs." "Excellent. I've asked Nathan to attend as our firm's representative. It would be valuable for him to understand the intersection between corporate interests and community needs." Nathan nodded, looking somewhat intrigued. "Sounds interesting, actually." My father set the coffee pot down harder than necessary. "Nathan's schedule is quite full with the Robinson acquisition." "This takes precedence," Marcus said firmly. "Our firm is evolving its approach to community investment. Nathan's department will be directly involved." The shift in power was subtle but unmistakable. My father, used to controlling the narrative, found himself sidelined in his own home. As the evening progressed, Marcus continued directing questions to me about my work, each answer revealing more connections between my advocacy and Nathan's corporate world than I had ever realized existed. My father grew increasingly quiet, while my mother maintained a brittle smile. When Marcus finally announced he needed to leave, he shook Nathan's hand warmly. "Looking forward to our strategy meeting Tuesday. And don't forget about that housing summit." Then he turned to me. "Olivia, it was a pleasure meeting you properly. I'd like to continue our conversation about potential collaboration. Here's my card, my direct line is on the back." My father stepped forward. "I'll walk you out, Marcus." After they left, Nathan turned to me with raised eyebrows. "So, apparently my boss is your biggest fan." I shrugged, uncomfortable with his sudden attention. "I was just doing my job. For 3 years, Dad has been telling me that what you do is glorified charity work. Tonight I find out your research directly impacted my biggest case." He shook his head. I don't know what that is." "Surprising?" I offered. "Yeah. And maybe a little embarrassing that I didn't know." Before I could respond, our father returned, his face flushed with barely contained anger. "Well," he said tightly, "that was quite a performance, Olivia." "Performance?" I repeated. "Hijacking Nathan's dinner to promote your little community project. Marcus came here to discuss Nathan's future at the firm, not to hear about homeless shelters." Nathan frowned. "Dad, that's not." "It's fine, Nathan," I interrupted. "Dad's right. This dinner was supposed to be about your promotion. Congratulations, by the way. I mean that." I gathered my purse and jacket. I should head home. Early day tomorrow. My mother emerged from the kitchen. "You're leaving already? We haven't even had coffee." "I think it's best," I said, suddenly exhausted by the effort of navigating their expectations. "Thank you for dinner." As I moved toward the door, my father's voice stopped me. "This is typical, isn't it? When things don't revolve around you, you just leave." I turned slowly. "That's not fair." "Life isn't fair, Olivia. Nathan has worked incredibly hard to get where he is. He deserves recognition without you trying to one-up him." "Richard," my mother cautioned, glancing nervously at Nathan. "No, Elizabeth. She needs to hear this. We've supported you through everything, college, that year you spent finding yourself in South America, even this community center phase. But you can't stand it when Nathan succeeds. The injustice of his words hit me like a physical blow. Supported me? You've diminished everything I've ever done because it didn't fit your definition of success. We paid for your education. He shot back. Yes, at the university you chose, for the business degree you wanted me to have, which I've never used because it's not what I care about. That degree could have gotten you a real job instead of playing savior to the poor. Something snapped inside me. My job is real. I help people access housing, healthcare, and legal aid. I develop programs that change lives. And apparently, I influence corporate decisions enough that my work affected Nathan's precious merger. Enough, Nathan stepped between us. This isn't helping anyone. My father pointed at me, his finger trembling. You've always been difficult. Always questioning, challenging, never satisfied with the opportunities we gave you. The only opportunities you valued were the ones that made you look good. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Do you know why I never talk about my work here? Because every time I try, you change the subject or dismiss it as temporary or naive. Because we want better for you. No, because you want what fits your narrative. The daughter with the prestigious job in the corner office. The problem is, that's not me. It never was. My mother stepped forward, distress evident on her face. Please, let's not do this on Easter. I'm not doing anything, Mom. I'm just finally saying what I've kept inside for years. Nathan put his hand on my shoulder. Liv, maybe we should talk about this another time. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw uncertainty in his eyes. Did you know, I asked quietly, that Dad called my boss last year and tried to convince him to fire me? Said it would be for my own good, to force me into a real career? Nathan's hand dropped. What? Dad, is that true? My father's silence was answer enough. I nearly lost my job, I continued. The only reason I didn't was because my work spoke for itself. My boss told Dad he'd be a fool to let me go. I was trying to help you, my father finally said. That place is a dead end. It's not a dead end. It's my choice. My passion. And apparently, it matters enough that Marcus Hendricks himself recognizes its value. The mention of Marcus seemed to deflate my father slightly. He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking older. You've never understood what we wanted for you, he said, his voice lower now. No, you've never understood what I wanted for myself. We stood there, the four of us, in a tableau of family dysfunction that had been years in the making. My mother wringing her hands, my father rigid with disapproval, Nathan caught between loyalty to them and this new awareness of me. I'm going home, I said finally. Thank you for dinner. This time, no one tried to stop me. Outside, the spring air felt clean and clarifying after the tension of the house. I took deep breaths as I walked to my car, hands shaking slightly. As I fumbled for my keys. Olivia. I turned to find Nathan jogging down the driveway toward me. Are you okay? He asked, concern evident in his voice. I'm fine. Just drained. He nodded. I had no idea about any of it, your work influencing the merger, Dad trying to get you fired. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me over Dad? He flinched, and I knew the answer. I'm sorry, he said after a moment. I should have paid more attention. It's not your fault. You were busy becoming what they wanted. And you were busy becoming something else entirely. He shoved his hands in his pockets. Something that apparently matters enough for Marcus Hendricks to notice. I managed a small smile. Life is full of surprises. Yeah. He hesitated. About that housing summit, I'd like to come. Not because Marcus told me to, but because I want to understand what you do. For the first time that evening, I felt something loosen in my chest. I'd like that. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw Nathan still standing in the driveway, watching me go. Something had shifted tonight, not just in how he saw me, but in how I saw myself. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. Ms. Gardner, Marcus Hendricks here. Apologies for the awkward dinner, but I'd like to discuss a potential partnership between our foundation and your organization. Are you available for coffee this week? I pulled over to respond, my hands steadier now. For years, I'd believed the narrative my parents had constructed, that my work was less valuable, less significant than my brother's corporate success. Tonight, that story had begun to unravel. What would happen tomorrow when I returned to my parents' house to retrieve the jacket I'd deliberately left behind? Would my father apologize, or would he double down on his disappointment? But for the first time, I understood that their approval wasn't the measure of my worth. I texted Marcus back, "Coffee sounds great. How about Tuesday at 2? His response came quickly, "Perfect. And bring your proposal for the West Side expansion. I think our foundation might be interested." I stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. Validation, yes, but something more important, the realization that I had built something meaningful without their blessing or approval. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, driving home under a canopy of stars, I felt strangely peaceful. The truth had finally been spoken, and whatever came next, I would face it standing firmly in my own worth. /artifact I've completed part 1 of your story based on the title. At Easter dinner, my dad bragged about my brother's promotion, then his boss recognized me. This part establishes the female protagonist, Olivia, introduces the family dynamics and conflict, and includes the powerful hook at the beginning. The next morning, I woke to 6 missed calls from my mother and a text from Nathan that simply read, "Dad's on the warpath. Brace yourself." I placed my phone face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling, replaying last night's dinner. In my mind, the shock on my father's face when Marcus Hendricks recognized my work. The slow unraveling of the family narrative. The words finally spoken after years of silence. My apartment was small but entirely mine, a 1-bedroom in an old converted factory building with exposed brick walls and large windows that flooded the space with morning light. I'd chosen it specifically because it was nothing like the pristine suburban home where I'd grown up. Here, there were no family photos arranged to tell a curated story, no furniture chosen to impress guests, just pieces I'd collected that brought me joy. I made coffee and carried it to my tiny balcony overlooking the river. The community center, where I worked, was just visible in the distance, its roof painted bright blue after a neighborhood revitalization project last summer. Children had helped design the mural that now wrapped around the building, a colorful depiction of the diverse neighborhood we served. My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered. "Olivia? Thank goodness." My mother's voice had that controlled quality it always took on when she was managing a crisis. "Your father wants to speak with you." "I'm not ready for that conversation," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "He's very upset about how things went last night. You embarrassed him in front of Nathan's boss." I took a deep breath. I answered questions about my work. "Mom. That's all. You know how important this promotion is for Nathan. For all of us. I know how important it is to Dad. And I'm genuinely happy for Nathan. But that doesn't mean I have to diminish my own work to make his seem more impressive." She sighed. "This isn't like you, Olivia. You've always been the peacekeeper." Had I? Or had I just been quiet, swallowing my truth to maintain their illusion of family harmony? "I need to get ready for work," I said finally. "I'll call Dad when I'm ready to talk." After hanging up, I opened my laptop to review my calendar. Between meetings with community members and work on the new housing initiative, I'd scheduled coffee with Marcus Hendricks tomorrow. The thought sent a mix of excitement and apprehension through me. What if this potential partnership fell through? What if my father somehow interfered? My colleague and friend, Zoe, was already at her desk when I arrived at the center. With her bright purple hair and collection of vintage brooches, she stood out among the serious nonprofit professionals. But her appearance belied a razor-sharp mind that had helped secure our last 3 major grants. "You look like you've been through a war," she observed, pushing a second cup of coffee toward me. "Family dinner," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Ah, the Gardner Easter extravaganza. How was it watching your brother get canonized this year?" I couldn't help smiling. Zoe had heard enough stories about my family to understand the dynamics perfectly. Actually, something unexpected happened. I told her about Marcus Hendricks recognizing my work, the revelation about the Peterson merger, and the confrontation that followed. "Holy shit," she whispered when I finished. "Your advocacy work influenced your brother's corporate merger? That's like poetic justice." It was surreal. All these years, I thought my work and Nathan's existed in completely separate spheres. And now his boss wants to meet with you. She leaned forward. "Olivia, do you realize what this could mean for our housing initiative? Caldwell and Ross's foundation has serious resources. If the partnership happens," I cautioned, "my father might try to sabotage it." Zoe's expression hardened. Would he really go that far? I thought about the call to my boss last year. Yes, he would. Then we prepare. What's our strategy? This was why I loved working with Zoe. She never wasted time on sympathetic platitudes when action was needed. First, I need to document everything. The timeline of events, copies of the impact report that influenced the Peterson merger, any communication with Marcus. Good. And I'll pull together our proposal for the Westside expansion. If he's already interested, we should be ready to move quickly. I nodded, feeling more centered with a plan in place. I should also talk to James. James Chen was our executive director, the boss my father had tried to pressure into firing me. He should know about the potential partnership and the potential complications. Zoe squeezed my arm. You've got this. And you've got us. This is your moment, Olivia. The rest of the morning passed in a flurry of meetings and phone calls. I was reviewing budget projections for our summer youth program when James appeared in my doorway. Got a minute? He asked, his expression unreadable. Of course. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, trying to ignore the flutter of anxiety in my stomach. James closed the door behind him and sat down. At 58, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he had the calm presence of someone who'd spent decades in community organizing. I received an interesting call this morning, he began. From Richard Gardner. My heart sank. My father called you? Again? Again, James confirmed, his expression softening slightly at my distress. He seems to think I should reconsider your role in the upcoming City Housing Committee. He's trying to sabotage me, I said, the realization painful despite its predictability. He suggested you might be overextending yourself, and that the committee responsibilities would be too much pressure given your current workload. I closed my eyes briefly. Did he mention that his son's boss is interested in partnering with us? He did not. James leaned forward. Tell me everything. I recounted the Easter dinner confrontation, watching James's expression shift from concern to intrigue. Marcus Hendricks, he mused when I finished. That's a valuable connection. Which my father is now trying to undermine. James was quiet for a moment, studying me. Olivia, I've known you for 5 years. In that time, I've watched you build our housing advocacy program from scratch, secure partnerships no one thought possible, and never once seek credit for your achievements. I wasn't sure where he was going with this. I was just doing my job. No, you were doing much more than your job. You were fighting for people who needed someone in their corner. He removed his glasses and cleaned them thoughtfully. Your father called me last year because he believed I'd value his opinion as a successful businessman over the evidence of your work. He was wrong then, and he's wrong now. Relief washed through me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. James replaced his glasses. We need to prepare for this meeting with Marcus Hendricks. If Caldwell and Ross's foundation partners with us, it could transform our Westside initiative. Your father clearly doesn't want that to happen. Because it would validate my choices, I said, understanding dawning. It would prove that my work has real impact. Precisely. So we need to make sure this partnership happens despite his interference. For the next hour, James and I strategized. We refined the Westside expansion proposal, gathered data on our previous successes, and prepared responses to potential concerns. By the time he left my office, I felt more confident about tomorrow's meeting with Marcus. That confidence wavered when I checked my phone during lunch and found a text from an unknown number. This is Charles Westridge. Your father suggested we speak regarding your organization's opposition to my company's development projects. Charles Westridge, the CEO of Westridge Development Group, the company I'd testified against, and apparently, my father's golfing buddy. My hand shook slightly as I showed the message to Zoe. He's pulling out all the stops, she said, eyes widening. Using his connections to pressure you. What should I do? Ignore it? She considered this. No, that gives him the upper hand. Respond professionally. Set boundaries. I composed a careful reply. Mr. Westridge, thank you for reaching out. All of our testimony was based on documented research. I'd be happy to share our findings with you directly. However, I want to be clear that our advocacy position remains unchanged. His response came quickly. Perhaps we should discuss this over lunch tomorrow? Your father speaks highly of your intelligence. I'm sure we can find common ground. Tomorrow, the same day as my meeting with Marcus Hendricks, Zoe said, reading over my shoulder. I texted back, unfortunately, my schedule is full tomorrow. I'd be happy to meet next week. This matter is time-sensitive, came the reply. Your father indicated you would make yourself available. The presumption ignited something in me. My schedule is not determined by my father, Mr. Westridge. I can meet Thursday at 2 p.m. Please let me know if that works for you. There was a longer pause before his next message, Thursday at 2. My office. No pleasantries, just a directive. Well done, Zoe said, squeezing my shoulder. Professional but firm. My father is going to be furious. Probably. But you're 30 years old, Olivia. It's time he recognized you make your own decisions. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. That evening, I decided to stop by my parents' house. To retrieve my jacket and face whatever confrontation awaited. The suburban neighborhood was quiet, large homes set back from tree-lined streets, each yard meticulously maintained. My parents' house, a colonial with white columns and perfect symmetry, stood like a monument to conventional success. I used my key rather than ringing the doorbell, half hoping to slip in and out unnoticed. But my father was waiting in the living room, a glass of scotch in hand. So you decided to show up, he said, his voice deceptively calm. I left my jacket here. I spotted it draped over a chair. Charles Westridge called me. He said you refused to meet with him tomorrow. I took a deep breath. I have a prior commitment. With Marcus Hendricks, I presume. He took a sip of his scotch. You've been busy leveraging Nathan's connections. The unfairness of the accusation stung. I didn't seek out Marcus. He recognized my work. Your work, my father repeated with a dismissive wave. Do you have any idea what you've done? Charles Westridge has been my friend for 20 years. His company has contracts with half my clients. And his developments have displaced hundreds of families, I countered. That's not personal, Dad. It's documented fact. Facts can be interpreted different ways. You chose to interpret them. In a way that damaged his reputation. I presented the data. The commission made their decision. He set his glass down hard enough that scotch sloshed over the rim. You've always been stubborn. Even as a child, you questioned everything, challenged everyone. We tried to channel that quality into something productive. You tried to change me, I interrupted. There's a difference. He stared at me, something like surprise crossing his features. We wanted what was best for you. No, you wanted what aligned with your vision of success. When I found my own path, you dismissed it as naive or temporary. Because working at that community center isn't a real career. It's a stepping stone at best. It is my career, Dad. I've been there 5 years. I've built programs that have helped thousands of people. I've influenced policy decisions. And now, apparently, I've influenced corporate mergers. He shook his head. One meeting with Marcus Hendricks and you think you've made it. You have no idea how the real world works. The real world? I repeated. You mean your world? Where success is measured in profit margins and country club memberships. Don't be dramatic, Olivia. Success is providing for your family, building something that lasts. That's exactly what I'm doing. Just not in the way you would choose. We stood facing each other, the gulf between us wider than ever. In his eyes, I could see genuine bewilderment. He truly couldn't understand why I would choose my path over the one he'd envisioned for me. Your meeting with Marcus won't change anything, he said finally. You're still throwing away your potential. I picked up my jacket. My potential is exactly what I'm fulfilling. Just not according to your definition. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Charles Westridge can make things very difficult for your little community center. I paused at the door. Is that a threat, Dad? It's a reality check. You've made an enemy of a powerful man. No, you've chosen to see my professional advocacy as a personal attack. That's your choice, not mine. Outside, I leaned against my car, trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. You okay? Dad called me ranting. About Westridge and Marcus. I texted back, I'm fine. Just picked up my jacket. Heading home. Want company? I could bring dinner. The offer surprised me. Nathan and I hadn't spent time alone together in months, maybe years. Our relationship had been defined by family gatherings and the roles we played there. Sure, I replied. My place in an hour? See you then. When Nathan arrived at my apartment, bearing Thai food and a 6-pack of craft beer, he looked different. Somehow, less the polished corporate lawyer and more the brother I remembered from childhood. He'd changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a faded college sweatshirt. Nice place, he said, glancing around my apartment. It suits you. Thanks. I took the food and arranged it on my small dining table. How bad was Dad's rant? Nathan grimaced as he opened 2 beers. Epic. I've never seen him so worked up. Kept saying you were sabotaging family connections. By doing my job. Yeah, I pointed that out. He handed me a beer. Didn't go over well. We settled at the table, the familiar routine of sharing. Food easing some of the tension between us. I looked up your testimony against Westridge Development, Nathan said after a few minutes. Pretty compelling stuff. I nearly choked on my pad thai. You did? After last night, I wanted to understand what Marcus was talking about. He twirled noodles around his fork. You really proved that their previous developments led to increased homelessness rates? We tracked outcomes for 5 years. The data was irrefutable. He nodded slowly. And now Dad's friend Westridge is pressuring you to back off? He wants to meet Thursday. Dad apparently told him I'd be available tomorrow instead, presumably to prevent me from meeting with Marcus. Nathan shook his head. Classic Dad, pulling strings behind the scenes. He set down his fork. Liv, I need to ask you something. Last night, you said Dad tried to get you fired. Was that true? Yes. Last year, after I testified at the city council meeting about affordable housing requirements. He called James and suggested I was struggling emotionally and would benefit from a change of environment. Jesus. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. And your boss told him off? James told him that I was the most valuable member of his team and that my emotional state was evident in the measurable impact of my programs. I smiled at the memory. Dad didn't call again until today. What happened today? Same playbook. Suggested I was overextending myself and shouldn't take on the city housing committee role. Nathan was quiet for a moment. I had no idea he was interfering like this. I thought he just disapproved, not that he was actively undermining you. Why would you know? We haven't really talked, in years. He looked genuinely remorseful. That's on me. I got caught up in trying to be what Dad wanted. It was easier than fighting him. I understand, I said, and I did. The path of least resistance with Richard Gardner had always been compliance. It's different for you anyway. Your dreams aligned with his. Did they? Nathan took a long pull of his beer. Sometimes I wonder. I like the law, the challenge of it. But the 60-hour weeks, the cutthroat politics, the constant pressure to bring in bigger clients. I'm not sure I would have chosen this firm if Dad hadn't pushed so hard. This was new territory, Nathan questioning the path that had always seemed so certain. What would you have chosen? I asked. Maybe environmental law. Or civil rights. Something with purpose. He looked around my apartment again, taking in the community center blueprints pinned to my wall, the shelf of books on social policy and urban planning. Like what you have. It's not too late, you know, to find purpose in your work. He smiled wryly. Says the woman who built an entire career around it. We talked late into the evening, really talked, for the first time in years. Nathan told me about the mounting pressure at the firm, the ethical compromises he'd witnessed, the growing hollowness he felt despite his success. I shared stories about the families we'd helped at the center, the policy victories, the challenges of making change in a system designed to resist it. As he was leaving, Nathan paused at the door. Good luck with Marcus tomorrow. Dad's wrong. About your work, Liv. It matters. Maybe more than he can understand. I hugged him, a real hug, not the perfunctory ones we exchanged at family gatherings. Thanks for dinner. And for listening. It's what brothers are supposed to do. He hesitated. I'm sorry I haven't been better at it. After he left, I sat on my balcony looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow's meeting with Marcus Hendricks could change everything for our housing initiative. Or my father's interference could derail it completely. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder containing our Westside expansion proposal. If my work was going to be judged, it would be on its own merits, not on my father's disapproval. Or my family's expectations. For hours, I refined the proposal, strengthening the data points, clarifying the community impact, ensuring every assertion was backed by evidence. This was what I had built, my contribution that existed independent of the Gardner family legacy. As I finally closed my laptop in the early morning hours, I felt something settle within me, a quiet certainty that whatever happened next, I was standing firmly in my own truth. My father had spent years trying to make me doubt the value of my chosen path. But now, ironically, his efforts to undermine me had only clarified how much my work truly mattered. The coffee shop where I'd arranged to meet Marcus Hendricks was halfway between my office and the Caldwell and Ross building. Neutral territory. I arrived 15 minutes early, claimed a quiet corner table, and arranged my materials: the Westside expansion proposal, our impact reports, and a folder containing the data that had influenced the Peterson merger. My phone buzzed with a text. From Zoe, knock em dead. Remember, you're the expert here. Her confidence bolstered mine. I straightened my blazer, a thrift store find that Zoe had tailored to fit perfectly, and took a deep breath. This meeting wasn't just about a potential partnership, it was about claiming my professional identity separate from my family's narrative. Marcus arrived precisely on time, trading his business suit for a more casual blazer and open-collared shirt. He spotted me and navigated through the crowded cafe with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "Miss Gardner," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for making time." "Please, call me Olivia," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. He settled across from me, declining my offer to get him coffee. "I've already had 4 cups today. Any more and my assistant will stage an intervention." The small joke eased some of the tension. Marcus Hendricks might be a powerful corporate attorney, but he was also just a person sitting across a cafe table. "I should apologize for the awkwardness at your parents' house," he began. "I didn't realize your family wasn't aware of the connection between your work and the Peterson merger." "They weren't aware of a lot of things," I said carefully, "including how much my advocacy work intersects with corporate interests." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That intersection is precisely why I wanted to meet. Your research on affordable housing displacement has influenced several of our firm's recent decisions." "In what way?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Our ethical investment guidelines have evolved over the past few years. We're increasingly focused on community impact alongside financial returns. Your organization's data has provided a framework for evaluating development projects that we've found invaluable." This was unexpected. I'd always assumed corporate law firms viewed community advocacy groups as obstacles to be overcome, not sources of valuable insight. "I'm glad our research has been useful," I said. "Though I'm surprised your firm takes it into account." "The corporate world is changing, Olivia. Companies that ignore social impact face increasing regulatory challenges, not to mention reputational damage. Smart businesses are getting ahead of this curve. And Caldwell and Ross wants to be seen as progressive?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "We want to be progressive, not just seen as such. There's a difference." I appreciated the distinction. "So, this potential partnership you mentioned?" "Yes." He leaned forward. "Our foundation has allocated funding for initiatives addressing urban housing inequality. Your organization's track record is impressive, particularly the community engagement model you've developed. We believe those most affected by housing policies should have a voice in shaping them," I explained. "Exactly. That approach aligns with our foundation's focus on sustainable community development." He gestured to my materials. "Is that the Westside expansion proposal?" I slid the folder across the table. "We're looking to scale our housing advocacy program to serve 5 additional neighborhoods. The areas have been targeted for development, putting approximately 800 families at risk of displacement." Marcus opened the folder and began reviewing the proposal, asking occasional questions about methodology and projected outcomes. His questions were insightful, demonstrating a genuine understanding of housing policy issues. "This is excellent work," he said finally. "Comprehensive, data-driven, and solution-oriented. Not just identifying problems but proposing viable alternatives." A warm sense of validation spread through me. This man, my brother's boss, someone my father respected, was recognizing the value of work my family had consistently dismissed. "The foundation board meets next week," Marcus continued. "With your permission, I'd like to present this proposal for consideration. We're looking to fund 3 major initiatives this year, and this would be an ideal fit." "Of course," I said, trying to contain my excitement. "What would the partnership entail?" "Funding, obviously. I'd estimate around $500,000 for the first year. But beyond that, we'd offer legal support for your advocacy work, connections to corporate partners for job placement programs, and possibly board representation to strengthen your organizational governance. $500,000. It was more than twice our current annual budget. With those resources, we could expand beyond the West Side, potentially impacting thousands of families. That's substantial, I managed. The need is substantial. He replied simply. And your organization has proven its effectiveness. We spent the next hour discussing specifics, timeline, reporting requirements, potential challenges. Throughout the conversation, I was struck by Marcus's genuine engagement with the issues. This wasn't just corporate philanthropy as public relations, he truly understood the complexities of urban housing inequality. As we prepared to leave, Marcus hesitated. There's something else I should mention. I received a call from Richard Gardner yesterday. My stomach tightened. My father called you? He did. He expressed concern about your organization's approach to development projects, specifically mentioning your opposition to Westridge Development Group. Of course he had. What did he say, exactly? That your advocacy was based on emotion rather than facts, and that Charles Westridge was a man of integrity whose company had been unfairly maligned. I took a steadying breath. And what was your response? That I'd reviewed your testimony myself and found it methodically researched and compelling. That the City Planning Commission's decision to require affordable housing minimums was based on data, not emotion. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. No need to thank me for stating facts. Marcus gathered his coat. Your father then suggested that involving Caldwell and Ross's foundation with your organization might create a conflict of interest, given your brother's position at the firm. And I couldn't keep the tension from my voice. I informed him that our foundation operates independently from the firm's legal practice, with separate governance and decision-making processes. And that we value partnerships with organizations that align with our mission, regardless of personal connections. I could almost picture my father's reaction to that response, the tightening of his jaw, the flash of anger quickly controlled. Will his call affect the foundation's decision? I had to ask. Marcus met my gaze directly. Not in the slightest. The proposal will be evaluated on its merits, not on family politics. As we parted outside the cafe, Marcus shook my hand. Again. I'll be in touch after the board meeting. And Olivia, regardless of what happens with the funding, your work matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I watched him walk away, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me, hope for the partnership, pride in my work's recognition, and a lingering sadness that my own father had tried to undermine me. Back at the office, I found James and Zoe waiting expectantly. How did it go? Zoe asked, practically bouncing with anticipation. I shared the details of the meeting, including the potential funding amount. James whistled softly when I mentioned the figure. That would transform our capacity, he said. We could hire additional staff, expand our legal advocacy team, increase our community outreach. If it happens, I cautioned. The board still needs to approve it. Based on what you've told us about Marcus's response, I'd say our chances are good, James replied. But we should prepare for the Westridge meeting regardless. Charles won't give up easily, especially if your father's involved. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. We refined our strategy for the Westridge meeting, gathered additional evidence supporting our testimony, and continued our regular community programs. On Thursday morning, I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a charcoal pantsuit that projected confidence without intimidation. Remember, you're going into his territory, Zoe reminded me as I prepared to leave for Westridge's downtown office. He'll try to use that to establish dominance. Don't let the fancy surroundings throw you. I grew up with Richard Gardner, I replied with a small smile. I'm immune to intimidation by expensive furniture. Westridge Development Group occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower. The reception area featured marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary, and a receptionist whose polite smile never reached her eyes. Mr. Westridge is ready for you, she informed me after a brief phone call. Joanna will escort you to his office. I followed. A young assistant through a maze of hallways to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Charles Westridge stood as I entered, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and the deep tan of someone who spent weekends on golf courses. Miss Gardner, he said, his handshake firm and brief. Thank you for coming. Mr. Westridge. I replied, matching his professional tone. He gestured to a seating area with leather chairs arranged around a glass coffee table. Please, sit. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Water? Water would be fine, thank you. As he instructed his assistant to bring refreshments, I took the opportunity to survey the office. Family photos displayed prominently on a credenza, wife, grown children, grandchildren. Awards and recognitions lined one wall. A large architectural model dominated a side table, his next development project, perhaps. Your father speaks highly of you, Westridge began once we were seated. Says you're quite bright, just a bit idealistic. I'll take that as a compliment, I replied evenly. As intended. He leaned back in his chair. Richard and I go back a long way. Our children grew up together, though I don't believe you and my daughter ever became close. Different circles, I said, remembering Amanda Westridge from high school, cheerleader, prom queen, now a lifestyle influencer with 1 million followers. Indeed. He studied me for a moment. Your testimony against our riverfront project was quite damaging. The affordable housing requirement has cut projected profits by nearly 20%. At least he wasn't pretending this was a social call. The requirement ensures that existing residents won't be completely displaced by the development. It's a reasonable compromise. Reasonable from your perspective, perhaps. His tone remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened slightly. From mine, it's government overreach based on emotional appeals rather than sound economic principles. Our testimony wasn't based on emotion, Mr. Westridge. It was based on 5 years of data tracking outcomes from your previous developments. The displacement rates were documented, as were the resulting increases in homelessness and school instability for affected children. His assistant returned with water, creating a brief pause in our conversation. Once she left, Westridge leaned forward. Let me be direct, Ms. Gardner. Your organization has become a persistent obstacle to our projects. While I admire your dedication to your cause, it's creating unnecessary friction in the business community. Friction that impacts your father's relationships, including his standing with clients who have interests in our developments. So there it was, the real reason for this meeting. Not concern about housing policy, but about how my advocacy was affecting my father's business connections. My work isn't about my father, Mr. Westridge. It's about ensuring development doesn't come at the expense of vulnerable communities. Noble sentiments. His smile didn't reach his eyes. But perhaps we could find a middle ground. Your organization has certain funding needs, I imagine. Nonprofits always do. Was he actually offering to buy our silence? We're quite selective about our funding sources, I said carefully. We avoid partnerships that might compromise our advocacy positions. Everyone compromises, Ms. Gardner. It's how the real world functions. Your father understands this. My father doesn't speak for me or my organization. Westridge's expression cooled. That's unfortunate. He assured me you were reasonable. I am reasonable. That's why our testimony included specific, achievable recommendations rather than blanket opposition to development. The affordable housing component we advocated for is standard practice in many cities. Cities that are seeing decreased investment as a result, he countered. Developers go where the regulations are less burdensome. The data doesn't support that claim, I replied. Markets with inclusionary zoning policies continue to see robust development activity. The difference is that the benefits are more equitably distributed. For the next 30 minutes, we went back and forth, Westridge arguing for market-driven approaches, me advocating for policies that balanced growth with community preservation. It was clear we wouldn't reach agreement, but I maintained my professional demeanor even as his frustration became increasingly evident. Finally, he glanced at his watch. I have another appointment shortly. Let me be clear about my position. Westridge Development Group is prepared to incorporate some affordable units in our future projects, but the 20% requirement is excessive. If your organization would support a revision to 10%, we could find ways to be mutually supportive. And if we maintain our current position? His smile was thin. Then the opposition will continue. And I should note that opposition can take many forms. Your community center relies on various funding sources, municipal contracts, cooperation from city departments, relationships can be complex. The threat was barely veiled. Are you suggesting you would interfere with our funding? I'm suggesting that your intransigence has consequences beyond housing policy. Your father understands this. He's concerned about the impact your advocacy is having on his professional relationships that have benefited your family for decades. Mr. Westridge, I said, standing up, I appreciate your time, but I want to be equally clear. Our organization's position is based on research and community input, not personal or family considerations. We remain open to constructive dialogue about development approaches that prevent displacement, but we won't compromise our advocacy to protect business relationships. He stood as well, his expression hardening. Your father warned me you could be difficult. It seems he was right. My father and I have different priorities, I replied simply. As I left the imposing building and stepped into the spring sunshine, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Charles called. You were disrespectful and unreasonable. This ends now. I stared at the message, a familiar mix of anger and hurt rising within me. After a moment's hesitation, I typed back, I was professional and direct. If standing by my organization's research-based position is unreasonable, then yes, I was unreasonable. And no, this doesn't end now. My work continues regardless of your approval. His response came almost immediately, this discussion isn't over. Family dinner Sunday. Be there. Not a request, a command. The old Olivia would have acquiesced, shown up dutifully, endured the lecture about family loyalty and practical considerations. But I wasn't that person anymore. I have plans Sunday, I replied. I'm happy to talk when you're ready to respect my work and my choices. Then I turned off my phone and walked to a nearby park. The confrontation with Westridge had been draining, but also clarifying. For years, I'd tried to compartmentalize my professional life and my family relationships, pretending they existed in separate spheres. Now the boundaries had collapsed, forcing me to stand firmly in my complete identity, not just as Richard Gardner's daughter, but as Olivia Gardner, housing advocate and community leader. I found a bench overlooking a small pond and watched children feeding ducks, their laughter carrying across the water. This was why my work mattered, not for recognition or status, but for communities where families could thrive, where children could grow up with stability and opportunity. When I finally turned my phone back on, I found messages from Nathan, Zoe, and surprisingly, Marcus Hendricks. Nathan's text was brief, Dad's on the warpath again. What happened with Westridge? Zoe had sent 3 messages in succession, how did it go? Followed by, are you okay? And finally, call me when you can. Marcus's message was the most unexpected. Foundation board moved up their meeting. Your proposal was approved unanimously. $500,000 for year 1 with option to renew for 2 additional years. Congratulations. Official letter following. I read the message 3 times, hardly daring to believe it. The partnership was happening. Despite my father's interference, despite Westridge's threats, our work had been recognized and valued on its own merits. I called Zoe first, knowing she'd be anxiously waiting for news. Liv. Thank God. How did it go with Westridge? About as expected, I replied. Veiled threats, attempted bribery, invocation of my father's disappointment. The usual. That bad, huh? Are you okay? Actually, yes. I took a deep breath. And I have news. The Caldwell and Ross Foundation approved our proposal. Full funding for the Westside expansion. Her scream of delight was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What? Already? Oh my God. Olivia. This is huge. It is, I agreed, my own excitement building as the reality sank in. We can start implementation next month. We need to celebrate. I'm calling James and the team. Happy hour tonight, no excuses. After promising to meet them at our favorite bar at 6, I called Nathan next. Hey, he answered, sounding cautious. Are you alright? Dad's been ranting all afternoon. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. The foundation approved our funding proposal. Marcus's foundation? That's fantastic, Liv. Congratulations. His genuine enthusiasm warmed me. Thanks. I don't think Dad will see it that way, though. Probably not, Nathan agreed. But that doesn't diminish what you've accomplished. This is your victory, not his defeat. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's a helpful perspective. Years of therapy, he said with a self-deprecating laugh. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about what we discussed the other night. About finding purpose in my work. Oh? I've been looking into our firm's pro bono program. They actually Do substantial work on housing discrimination cases. I'm considering getting involved. I smiled, picturing my corporate lawyer brother applying his skills to help tenants fight unfair evictions. That would be amazing, Nathan. It's just a small step, he cautioned. But maybe a step in the right direction. After we hung up, I sat for a while longer, watching the late afternoon sunlight play across the water. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: my father's anger, Westridge's potential retaliation, the complex work of implementing our expanded program. But today, in this moment, I allowed myself to feel the simple satisfaction of being recognized for exactly who I was and what I had built. When I finally stood to leave, I texted my father one more message: the Caldwell and Ross Foundation has approved full funding for our Westside Housing Initiative. I would still like to talk when you're ready to see my work for what it is, not what you wish it would be. Then I walked toward the bar where my colleagues, my real community, waited to celebrate a victory that belonged to all of us. With each step, I felt myself moving further from the shadow of my father's expectations and more fully into the light of my own chosen path. News of the Caldwell and Ross Foundation grant spread quickly through our community network. By Monday morning, my inbox was flooded with congratulatory messages from partner organizations, community leaders, and families we'd helped through our housing advocacy work. The local paper ran a small article about the partnership, quoting Marcus Hendricks saying our organization represented the future of sustainable urban development. I printed the article and pinned it to my office bulletin board, not out of vanity, but as a reminder that persistence eventually creates its own validation. For 5 years, I'd built this program piece by piece, often questioning whether the endless grant applications, community meetings, and policy battles were making any real difference. Now we had resources to expand our impact beyond what I'd imagined possible. "Someone's popular today," Zoe said, leaning against my doorframe with a coffee mug in hand. "The mayor's office called. They want you to join the Housing Policy Task Force." "Really?" "That's been an exclusive club of developers and real estate interests for years." She grinned. "Apparently having $500,000 and the Caldwell and Ross name behind you changes the calculus. They're announcing new members next week." "This is exactly what we've been working toward," I said, feeling a surge of excitement. "A seat at the table where decisions actually happen." "Your seat," Zoe corrected. "You built this, Olivia. Own it." Before I could respond, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Olivia Gardner," I answered. "Miss Gardner, this is Amanda Westridge." I straightened in my chair, signaling to Zoe to give me privacy. Amanda Westridge, Charles Westridge's daughter, Instagram influencer extraordinaire, and former high school classmate. "Amanda, this is unexpected," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm sure it is." Her voice had the polished quality of someone accustomed to media appearances. "I saw the announcement about your organization's partnership with Caldwell and Ross. Congratulations." "Thank you." I waited, wondering about the real purpose of this call. "I'd like to meet with you, if you have time this week." "May I ask what about?" There was a brief pause. "It's regarding my father's company and your advocacy work. I'd prefer to discuss it in person." Curiosity won out over caution. "I could do tomorrow afternoon. There's a cafe near our center, Groundwork on 7th Street. "I know it. 3 o'clock? I'll be there." After we hung up, I sat back, puzzled. What could Amanda Westridge possibly want to discuss with me? We'd moved in entirely different circles in high school, she in the popular crowd, me in the debate team and community service club. Our paths hadn't crossed since graduation. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of meetings about implementing our expanded program. James and I developed a timeline for hiring additional staff, expanding our legal assistance services, and launching outreach in the new target neighborhoods. By the time I left the office, my mind was buzzing with possibilities. As I walked to my car, I spotted a familiar figure leaning against it, my father. My steps faltered briefly before I continued forward, steeling myself for the confrontation. "Dad," I said as I approached. "This is unexpected." He straightened, hands in the pockets of his expensive overcoat. "You've been avoiding my calls." "I've been busy. We just received major funding for our program expansion." "So I've heard. It's all over my business circles, Richard Gardner's daughter securing a partnership with Caldwell and Ross, the same firm where his son works. Quite the coincidence." The implication was clear: That I'd somehow leveraged family connections rather than earned the partnership on merit. It's not a coincidence, I said evenly. It's a recognition of the quality of our work. Work that was significant enough to influence Nathan's merger, which is how Marcus Hendricks became aware of our organization in the first place. My father's expression tightened. You're being naive, Olivia. Business partnerships are never just about merit. They're about relationships, optics, strategic positioning. Maybe in your world, I replied. But Marcus was clear that our proposal was evaluated on its merits alone. And you believe that? His tone was dismissive. Charles Westridge called me again yesterday. He says you refused to compromise on the affordable housing requirements, even when he offered funding for your center. He offered a bribe to soften our advocacy position. Of course I refused. He offered a mutually beneficial arrangement. That's how the real world works. I shook my head, frustrated by his persistent blindness to any value system different from his own. My world is just as real as yours, Dad. It just operates on different principles. Principles don't pay bills, he said sharply. They don't build careers or secure futures. Actually, they do. Our principled stance on housing policy is precisely what secured this partnership. Our unwillingness to compromise on displacement data is what made our testimony credible. He studied me for a moment, something shifting in his expression. You really believe that, don't you? I don't just believe it. I've lived it. Every day for the past 5 years. A couple walked past us toward the community center, nodding. In recognition. They were former clients, a family we'd helped fight an unjust eviction last year. Now the husband volunteered with our tenant rights workshops while his wife served on our community advisory board. This is the real world, Dad, I said, gesturing toward the center. People working together to build something that serves more than just profit margins. Communities supporting each other through systems designed to exclude them. My father followed my gaze, really looking at the building perhaps for the first time, the colorful mural, the community garden in the side lot, the steady stream of people coming and going even in early evening. Your mother wants you to come to dinner Sunday, he said finally, changing course. She's upset about the tension between us. I'm not interested in another lecture about family loyalty or practical careers. No lectures, he said, surprising me. Just dinner. I considered him skeptically. And Charles Westridge won't happen to drop by? A flash of something, embarrassment? Crossed his face. No. Just family. I'll think about it, I said, not ready to commit. He nodded, seeming to understand that this was as much as he could expect. As he turned to leave, he paused. The article mentioned you'll be expanding to 5 new neighborhoods. That's right. Which ones? I listed them, watching as he recognized the last name. Glendale Heights? That's where you grew up? Where our first house was? Yes. The neighborhood has changed since then. Many of the original families have been priced out by new development. He was quiet for a moment. I didn't know that. There's a lot happening in this city that isn't visible from downtown office buildings or country club dining rooms. He didn't argue the point, just nodded slightly. Sunday at 7, if you decide to come. I watched him walk to his luxury sedan, a strange mixture of emotions swirling within me. For the first time in our ongoing conflict, he hadn't dismissed my work outright. It wasn't acceptance, but it was something different than his usual contempt. The next afternoon, I arrived at Groundwork Cafe a few minutes early for my meeting with Amanda Westridge. The cafe was one of my favorites, a renovated warehouse space with exposed brick walls, local art, and a commitment to hiring formerly incarcerated individuals, giving them a pathway back to employment. I claimed a table near the window and ordered a cappuccino, reviewing notes for a community meeting later that evening. At precisely 3 o'clock, Amanda walked in. She looked just as polished in person as in her Instagram photos, perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes, immaculate makeup. Yet there was something different about her expression, a seriousness that her social media persona rarely revealed. Olivia, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for meeting me. Of course, I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. It's been a long time. You were always buried in books or organizing some volunteer project. And you were always surrounded by admirers, I responded, keeping my tone light. She laughed softly. Different paths. After ordering a tea, she turned to me with a more serious expression. I should get to the point of this meeting. I saw the article about your partnership with Caldwell and Ross, and I've been following your organization's work on affordable housing. I'm surprised it's on your radar, I admitted. More than you might think. She hesitated. I've been involved with a housing nonprofit myself for the past 2 years, Homes Forward. We focus on transitional housing for women leaving domestic violence situations. This was unexpected. Amanda Westridge, social media influencer and daughter of a prominent developer, involved in domestic violence advocacy? That's important work, I said sincerely. I wasn't aware of your involvement. I keep it separate from my public persona. It's personal. She twisted her teacup slowly. My college roommate was in an abusive relationship. When she finally left, she had nowhere to go. No family support, no resources. I saw firsthand how housing insecurity traps people in dangerous situations. I nodded, familiar with the devastating intersection of homelessness and domestic violence. Homes Forward does excellent work. We've referred clients to your transitional housing program. That's partly why I wanted to meet. Our organizations should be natural allies, but instead, there's this tension because of my father's company. Your father's company has directly contributed to housing displacement in communities we serve, I said carefully. Our opposition isn't personal, it's based on documented outcomes. I know. Her direct acknowledgement surprised me. I've read your reports. The data is compelling. Does your father know you're meeting with me? She shook her head. He wouldn't understand. Dad sees the world very differently than I do. He believes development always means progress, that market forces should determine housing patterns, that government intervention only creates inefficiency. And you? I've seen the human cost of that philosophy. The women in our program are not just statistics, they're people whose lives have been upended, often because affordable housing options disappeared. I studied her, reassessing my assumptions. Why are you telling me this? Amanda leaned forward. Because I think there might be a way forward that serves both community needs and development interests. A middle path my father hasn't considered. I'm listening. Westridge Development has a new project planned for the Riverside District. A mixed-use complex with retail, office space, and residential units. The current plan doesn't include affordable housing beyond the minimum now required by the city. Which they fought against, I reminded her. Yes. But what if they didn't? Just meet the minimum requirement, but exceeded it? What if they became a model for inclusive development? I raised an eyebrow skeptically. And why would they do that? Because I'm going to convince them it's in their long-term interest. There was a determination in her voice I'd never heard before. I've been developing a business case showing how inclusive development creates more sustainable growth, reduces regulatory friction, and actually enhances property values over time by creating diverse, vibrant communities. You really believe you can change your father's approach? She smiled slightly. I didn't get a business degree from Wharton just to post outfit photos on Instagram, Olivia. Behind the scenes, I've been increasingly involved in the company's strategic planning. Dad just doesn't advertise it because it doesn't fit his old-school image. This was a side of Amanda Westridge I never would have imagined existed. What are you proposing, exactly? A collaboration. Your organization has the community connections and housing expertise. Westridge has the development resources and industry influence. Together, we could create a demonstration project that shows inclusive development isn't just ethically right, it's good business. Your father would never agree to work with us. He sees our advocacy as a direct threat to his business model. Let me worry about my father, she said confidently. What I need to know is whether you'd be open to collaboration if he agrees to a substantive affordable housing commitment, say, 30% of units instead of the mandated 20%, plus community space and local hiring requirements. The proposal was intriguing. If Westridge Development, one of the city's largest developers, adopted inclusive practices beyond what regulations required, it could shift industry standards across the board. I'd need to discuss this with my team, I said carefully. And we'd want everything in writing, with clear accountability mechanisms. Of course. She pulled a folder from her designer bag and slid it across the table. Here's my preliminary proposal. Review it with your team. I'm meeting with my father's executive committee next week to present the business case. I accepted the folder, still trying to reconcile this strategic, passionate advocate with the popular girl I'd known in high school. This is unexpected. People change, Olivia. Sometimes they just need time to find their purpose. She smiled. Your advocacy work has made a real difference. The Housing Commission appointments, the policy changes, you've shifted the conversation in this city. I admire what you've built. Her sincere words touched me. Thank you. That means a lot. We all find our paths eventually. Sometimes they just look different than others expect. She glanced at her watch. I should go. I have a board meeting. For Homes Forward at 4. But think about the proposal? This could be transformative for both our organizations. As Amanda left, I opened the folder and began reading her proposal. It was comprehensive, thoughtful, and potentially revolutionary for how development happened in our city. I found myself wondering what my father would make of this unexpected alliance, his friend's daughter collaborating with his own daughter on a project that challenged his entire worldview. That evening, I shared Amanda's proposal with James and Zoe. Their initial skepticism gave way to cautious optimism as they reviewed the details. If Westridge actually implements this, it could create a new standard for responsible development, James mused. Other companies would feel pressure to follow suit. It's still a big if, Zoe cautioned. Charles Westridge isn't known for prioritizing community interests over profit margins. True, I acknowledged. But Amanda seems determined. And she's making a business case, not just an ethical one. Speaking of unexpected allies, James said, the mayor's office confirmed your appointment to the Housing Policy Task Force. First meeting is next month. A seat at the table where decisions were made. Access to the conversations that shaped policy. It was what we'd worked toward for years. Looks like you're becoming part of the establishment, Gardner, Zoe teased. Next thing we know, you'll be running for city council. The idea had never occurred to me before, but something about it resonated. Not immediately, but perhaps someday, another platform from which to advocate for equitable development and community voice. Sunday arrived, and after much deliberation, I decided to attend the family dinner. Not out of obligation, but from a place of new confidence. I no longer needed my parents' validation or approval. I could engage with them as an adult with my own accomplished path, not as a daughter seeking acceptance. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.